In light of the 5th Indiana Jones movie releasing this weekend, I have embarked on a journey of nostalgia. An adventure, you might say. An adventure that has brought me so much joy that it saddens me to think I just might lose that joy with Indy 5, the Dial of Disappointment, I mean Destiny. From everything I've heard, from the surprisingly negative critics' reviews to the opening weekend box office predictions, I don't hold a lot of hope for this movie. By the time you're watching this video, the movie will already be out, but I won't be seeing it until next week, and that's totally not because I don't want to contribute to the opening box office numbers. We'll see come Sunday if those predictions hold true. My journey started out a few weeks ago when I went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark in theaters. It was 100% worth it, 10 out of 10, would do again. And as a side note, now that I think about it, the last 4 movies I've seen in theaters have been 80s movies. Raiders, Return of the Jedi, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future. Anyway, over the past few weeks, I've rewatched the Indiana Jones movies, capping off my rewatch last night with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Full disclosure, Crystal Skull was up there with Star Trek Generations for me, as I mentioned in a previous video. It holds a ton of nostalgia, so I'm not super concerned with any nitpicky criticisms. But watching it again now as a 26-year-old compared to an 11-year-old, I could definitely see its flaws. But I still had a fun time watching it. I mean, sure, was Harrison Ford a bit too old to be believably doing all he did? Maybe. The CGI? Definitely not the best, but I suppose it was 2008. And I can totally concede that overall it pales in comparison to the original trilogy. I would have said that back in the day, too. I will also concede that several times throughout watching it, I kept thinking, man, I'd rather be watching Raiders. Most of that nostalgia was still there, but it had been over a decade since I last watched the movies, so I'm definitely seeing it a little differently now. But, like I said, I still had fun watching it again, even if it was just for a trip down memory lane. Some of my opinions haven't changed over the years. The ending, still freaking wild. There's always been some sort of supernatural element to Indiana Jones movies pertaining to the artifact the movie revolves around, but there was just something too much about the alien angle. And don't get me wrong, aliens and sci-fi are my bread and butter. But there was something just too over the top with this. I didn't hate it, but the story felt a little too generic, and I see that more now than I did back in 2008. Though, granted, back then I wasn't exactly watching for a compelling story. I was really just there for the eye candy. Did I mention aliens? But watching it now as an adult with hopefully better critical thinking skills, the story overall didn't feel very inspired, and was rather boring. It felt like it was lacking something the original movies had, and the only thing I can come up with would be heart. It didn't have that same spark the other movies had. And maybe that just boils down to the storytelling. It was fun seeing the man we knew as Indiana doing his thing, but take away the name, and you've just got a generic adventure movie. Looking at you, Uncharted. The action scenes were exciting, even if some of them did feel a little over the top. And I always thought the refrigerator scene was cool, okay? Sue me. The scenes in between, however, often felt a little slow. The whole first half of the movie felt slow, but when Marion showed up, the pace picks up, and I enjoyed the latter half much better than the first. Thinking about it, it felt like there was nothing really at stake until she showed up, and then Indy suddenly had someone he really cared about that he needed to get out of danger. Maybe it's because I've seen it so many times, but the Russians gunning for them never really felt like a threat, not like the big bads in the original trilogy. The Russians were more of just a nuisance. And oh yeah, aliens. Brainwashing aliens. The rest of the cast was fine, but Shia LaBeouf's performance was not my favorite. And I'll be honest, Mutt was never a favorite character anyway, and I still don't particularly like him. But I remember back when I first saw the movie thinking that Mutt, when he's about to put on the hat, would take on his father's legacy. I'm really glad that didn't happen, but it seems now they're trying to make the name Indiana into a mantle to be passed on, which it 100% is not. There's a reason people say Indiana Jones should have ended with The Last Crusade, not only with it being the last, but also, why else would you have your beloved hero riding off into the sunset? At the end of the day, did Crystal Skull really add anything to the franchise? Not really. But Alien Schlinn? What about the freaking aliens? Speaking of The Last Crusade, it might be wild to say, but I have similar feelings about Crystal Skull as I do about The Last Crusade, simply because I watched those two movies the most and used to reenact them nearly scene by scene in the backyard when I was a kid. When I wasn't pretending I was running on top of a moving train or galloping on horseback alongside a tank and going over a cliff, I was using a compass made out of gunpowder and shotgun shells to find a mummified alien body, and then escaping the warehouse in Area 51 that held the Ark of the Covenant, or sword fighting on the back of a jeep in the jungle. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull consumed me as an 11-year-old. I've got Lego sets galore from all of the movies, but one of the biggest sets I have, aside from a Star Wars Republic gunship and the Ecto-1 from Ghostbusters, is the Akator Temple, complete with booby traps, including the freaking aliens. It wasn't so much the story for me as a kid as it was the spectacle, and now as an adult, the shine is worn off. It's disappointing, but at least I've got the previous 3 movies to fall back on. No one can take those away. But one thing I'll say about Crystal Skull compared to what looks like this new movie will be, at least Indy wasn't put down in order to raise a female protagonist up, as it so often happens nowadays. It's as though the writers today have totally forgotten how to write legitimately good, strong female characters as they did back in the day. Weird, huh? But Indy still has his agency in this movie, and it never felt like I was having an agenda shoved down my throat, which honestly was the best part about it. Maybe Crystal Skull will be remembered more like Star Trek Enterprise after we got to experience Kurtzman Trek. Maybe we'll think, oh, this wasn't so bad compared to what we're getting now. But who knows? I'll have to wait and see that for myself when I go watch the new movie. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised, but I doubt it. If 65-year-old Harrison Ford was difficult to believe doing all those action scenes in 2008, I can't imagine what they'll seem like now that he's 80. I also can't believe it's been 15 years. And more than that, I'm not particularly looking forward to seeing his character get the Luke Skywalker treatment, being relegated to the background and made out to be an old fogey of the past that has no business being here in the future. And you can bet I'll be making a video reviewing my experience, so stick around and keep an eye out for that. Until then though, I'll continue on adventuring and maybe watch Raiders again. Who knows, maybe I'll even bust out my old Lego sets, get them dusted off, and figure out a way to properly display them. But until we meet again, fellow adventurers, this is Shlyn, signing out.